Hi, it's Jerry Roberts back with another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Plague Year. It is Monday, September 28th, and tomorrow night, Tuesday, we have the first presidential debate, which we've all been awaiting, and we're really lucky this morning to have one of the top political communications strategists in the country, Bill Carrick, joins us from LA. Bill, thanks so much for being here. So you've been involved a lot, I know, with preparing candidates for debates, debate prep, and so on and so forth. You know, there's always a faction of the news of the press room that says, "Oh, debates don't matter because the people that have watched them have already made up their mind." And it certainly seems like this is a baked-in election. But do you think this one has much importance, or how much importance do you put on it?
You know, the interesting part about the debate system as it's evolved since 1960, you know, the biggest sort of variable that is was worth watching is incumbents very often have a very bad first debate. Ronald Reagan comes to mind, and of course, Barack Obama famously against Mitt Romney. Secretary Clinton's debate wasn't very good, the first one against Trump last time. The first debate for the incumbent or the most seasoned candidate seems to be a little flatter. You know, George H.W. Bush famously had a terrible debate in his first debate. And, you know, oftentimes they recover. Reagan in particular had a fantastic recovery in the second debate. And of course, Obama did as well, but it's always interesting, the first debate, just because the incumbents come into these things pretty rusty.
Yeah, well, and of course, you know, Trump famously never prepares for debates anyway. He just goes in and says whatever's on it.
Trump and the idea of a campaign having a message are deeply in conflict. Because no matter what he thinks the message of the week is, even if it's the nomination of a Supreme Court justice, he will step on the message.
So we can pretty much expect him to go in and just try to tear Biden's face off, I guess. But what does Biden need to come out of it with? What is he, you know, if you were advising Biden, what does he need to accomplish?
Well, I think he has to make sure he didn't get sucked into the Trump S show during the whole thing. And, you know, and Trump's, you know, he needs to take a drug test. Of course, he did that to Secretary Clinton too. He had the same line, you know, and this is stale old line. And then the other thing, he threatening to attack Vice President Biden's son, Hunter, because he thinks that gets under his skin. I mean, he just has to watch himself and make sure he doesn't get sucked into the whole Trump craziness.
So Biden seems like his message, he's got sort of a two-track message. One is he's saying the campaign is about character, that Trump has, you know, dragged the United States down and is basically an anti-democracy person. And the other is really about healthcare and about the pandemic, particularly. How does he, you know, approach it? Does he attack Trump, or does he just try to stay positive and you know, talk about what he would do differently?
I think he does try to make it out. You know, his whole build it better sort of message. I think he's going to do some of that, but I think he's going to go after Trump on particularly the pandemic and the Affordable Care Act. I think we're going to hear a lot of that, and I think it's highlighted by the Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. All right. So it's interesting that Fox News gets the first debate, which is, I scratch my head about that. But Chris Wallace he's a pretty straight shooter.
I prefer to think of it as Chris Wallace got the first debate.
Just so they would make sure that Trump would at least come, I guess, and something.
I'm sure Trump doesn't like Chris Wallace.
No, he doesn't. But Wallace is not going to, I mean, you know, Trump is a congenital liar. It's hard to debate a congenital liar. So in terms of the fact checking, Wallace isn't going to do that in real time. Should Biden do that in real time, or is he going to just then kind of cede his time by trying to correct Trump all the time?
Well, that's potentially there. I think if there's a really genuine whopper that he can exploit, he might do that. I do think Chris Wallace is smart enough and got a pretty much an encyclopedia knowledge of issues. He could fact check in real time. Now, not a lot of folks can, but Chris could. On the other hand, there will be a large army of people fact checking the debate from every major media outlet in the country.
All right.
You're doing it in real time, as you know, that now all that fact checking gets done in real time.
That guy Daniel Dale on CNN is just he's amazing. I mean,
you're going crazy the whole time.
He's just tweeting the whole time, and then he gets on the air and he's just rah. I mean, it's really extraordinary. All right, let's talk about the 6 issue areas that they're going to be focused on. The first is quote unquote Trump and Biden's record, which could pretty much be anything. You think Biden should go right at the pandemic on that, and you expect Trump to go after Hunter Biden, or how do you figure that's going to play out?
I think that Vice President Biden's going to keep focused on the pandemic. He's going to keep going. He's going to keep going back to that and hitting it hard. And I think an extension to that will be the Affordable Care Act and how it's threatened. And this is the horrible time to be even contemplating taking away pre-existing conditions from people, for example. So I think there'll be plenty of back and forth on that stuff. Trump, Jerry, the truth is he's unpredictable. I guess he'll do the Hunter Biden stuff. I mean, based on the 2 hours I spent reading the New York Times tax speech yesterday, I would say he's got some issues with his own children, Trump, and whether they were paying their taxes and getting paid as consultants and not employees, which looks pretty bad. So he may be reconsidering that. But, who knows? We have no idea.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's just, he is totally unpredictable. And Biden's got kind of a short fuse. So there's a risk there of Biden kind of getting his Irish up, not to be anti-Irish here, but to get angry about something and kind of fall into that trap. So what is Ron Klain, who is Biden's chief advisor, what is he telling Biden about that?
Oh, Ron is definitely somebody who will try to modulate all of that. So, any kind of anger or outburst of that kind, he will be cautioning him not to, get sucked into that. Ron, of course, has had enormous experience with debates, not only with the Vice President Biden, but with President Obama as well. So he's really a steady hand, in that world, in the debate prep world for Biden. And, you and I could stay on this Zoom call for 3 hours before we could name who the steady hand is in the Trump debate team.
Well, it was sad actually to see his former campaign manager is now apparently the cops had to come because he was threatening suicide. I mean, it just, you get the feeling the wheels are falling off in Trump world. You still there, Bill?
Yeah, really, the whole thing is just gone. Yeah, I'm here. It's very, very strange. The people involved in it and who they are, and your internet connection is unstable. We were being advised, Jerry. But it's they're a very unstable group of people, and they don't really they don't know whether they're going or coming every day. So it's just they're not very.
Yeah. All right. So the second issue they're going to talk about is the Supreme Court, and you have this yet another asteroid striking Earth with the death of Justice Ginsburg, and it allowed Trump to change the subject, at least temporarily, to talk about Supreme Court and values and all that kind of stuff. And, apparently Moscow Mitch is going to try to jam this right through the Senate. It's kind of a tricky thing for Biden because he's an institutionalist. So I guess he'd kind of say, yeah, he has the right to do it. But then you have the Merrick Garland situation with Obama. It's just kind of a messy political situation. What would you be advising Biden to? What line would you be advising him to take on the Supreme Court nomination?
Well, I think he takes it right to the Affordable Care Act. There's going to be a hearing before the election. There won't be a decision before the election, but there's going to be a hearing on the Affordable Care Act. And she is the potential justice. She is very, very, very outspoken on a lot of issues. I mean, unusually so for somebody who's been long considered a potential Supreme Court nominee. She wrote a long piece for the Notre Dame Law Review several years ago, which is tax the Affordable Care Act and its constitutionality. She has a long history of being highly critical of Roe v. Wade and Griswold versus Connecticut, which is, of course, the predecessor case. She's been very outspoken on this. So this is a person with a pretty big portfolio of opinions about these cases that she's going to have to rule on, which is in this never land. Are you prejudging a case before you have a hearing? And it seems to me that she has got a lot of judgment she's already made about how she would vote prior to even getting on the bench. And she was a clerk for Justice
Scalia,
and and he was considered to be the conservative. But the one thing about Scalia is he was very devoted to stare decisis, the rule of precedent, and he claimed that was why he was somewhat of a mild originalist, because he was very deeply committed to honoring precedent. She has no honoring precedent, so we're getting somebody who's going to tilt the court dramatically to the right. And the first thing out of the box is going to be the Affordable Care Act.
Well, it's interesting. And, the Senate hearings, the Judiciary Committee hearing is going to be kind of kabuki theater because, McConnell has the votes, apparently. Whether that takes place before the election, after the election, there's all these questions. But there's so much politics. Lindsey Graham, who's going to be chairing the meeting, is in trouble in your home state of South Carolina. So he's going to be very performative, even more than usual. And then Senator Feinstein, one of your clients, your long-term clients, is the ranking Democrat on the committee, and she's been getting a lot of heat, or a certain amount of heat, in the political press anyway. How do you expect those hearings to go, and do you think anybody's mind is going to be changed?
There's no chance of any of the Republicans on that committee voting against confirmation. It's just not. We have two Republican senators who have expressed their opposition to doing this before the election, Collins and Murkowski, but none of those people on judiciary are going to give 1 second's consideration of not voting for confirmation. So it is kabuki theater in the sense that it's all preordained. And I thought Senator Durbin was quite honest yesterday when he said on Stephanopoulos that we're not going to change the outcome of this. And that's right. It's not going to happen.
All right. The third issue is on the debate is going to be COVID, and obviously we talked a lot about that. Trump's position is, he just kind of makes stuff up and says that we could have lost 2.2 million people, which was that original Cambridge University proposal. But and he goes on about the vaccine. Is that going to change anybody's mind at all? Anything that either one of them says about COVID, do you think?
I don't think so, but I think it does reinforce people's anxiety about Trump and him continuing in office. So it does reinforce the people who've already inclined to vote against Trump. It is a barrier that prevents him from picking up any momentum.
Yeah.
And I think it's clearly the biggest issue, and it cuts across the board. I mean, there is some partisan breakdown, but there's a lot of it. Independents are very strongly opposed to Trump on his handling of the coronavirus.
All right. Then they're going to talk about the economy. And in all of polling, the economy is the one issue where Trump generally holds an edge over Biden, that people say they trust him more about the economy than they do Biden, although, we could talk about why that is. What does Biden need to do there to flip that, to try to make that a strength of his rather than the existing edge for Trump?
Well, that's the one place that he's filled in a lot of details in his own platform and proposals. So I think he's going to talk a lot, Build Back Better. He's going to talk a lot about that. He'll talk about his own role in the recovery from the Great Recession and the work he did on that. He'll do fine on the economy. I think Trump now, the tax revelations in the New York Times are going to put a little damper on his ability to be the great wizard of the economy, because obviously he's had his enormous failures in the business world, and he's had 2 cycles of just driving businesses right into the ground. He'll have an opportunity to destroy some of that credibility.
Yeah, and obviously Michigan is a huge toss-up state, which is going to be probably among the states that are determinative. I mean, you had Obama and Biden basically bailing out the auto industry in 2009. A lot of Republicans said that was a bad idea. Now Trump is going around and saying he's been, boosting the auto industry, which I guess there's a couple plants that have been built that were already online during his administration. Do you think they'll be talking specifically to, those Midwest industrial states, or do you think talking more broadly about the economy?
I think some focus, if they get an opportunity, on the industrial states, but I think in general they're going to be talking to the national audience, and and of course with the states that are starting to look more viable for Biden. I mean, he's got a big map now. He can talk to a lot of people in a lot of different places.
All right. Then they're going to talk about racial issues, and
other thing about the economy.
Yeah, go ahead.
COVID is an economic issue. I mean, we are in this mess economically we're in now because of the pandemic, and that I think Biden will make that connection. All
right. So on race, you have this sort of Rorschach test, political Rorschach test. On the Biden side, you see protests for social justice and racial equality, and then Trump portrays it as, he looks at what has been a certain amount of violence and says, these are anarchists out of control. How does Biden thread that needle?
I think he just has to be very strongly, and he has been, condemning of violence by any of the protesters, and really make sure that. And Trump has lied about Biden's position on that continuously. So he has made clear that he doesn't condone any violence by anybody on either side. But I think Biden has an advantage on this. This is another one of these conventional wisdom is wrong things.
Yeah.
A lot of the commentary and all was at the beginning of this is all going to come back and help Trump because it was Law and Order, and it was kind of 1968 revisited, and Nixon and Wallace versus the liberal Dems. It hadn't played out like that at all. You just go through the cultural things that are happening. Saturday morning, I flipped on, college football's back, so I flipped on the first game was Florida and Ole Miss. So what is the first thing the Florida and Ole Miss football teams do? Take a knee. We're in Oxford, Mississippi, and all the football players are taking a knee. So the weekend before, when they had 2 weekends before, when they had the FedEx Pro Golfer Championship in Atlanta, one of the sponsors was a Southern company, which owns a lot of utility companies in the South. You know what their spot was? We all got to work together, and it was just the spot could have been made by whoever. Black Lives Matter could have made the spot and put it on there, and it was the Southern company. So I think we're in a different cultural mood and I think it's advantage Biden on that issue, because I think people are more afraid of Trump doing something that's going to cause further issues than they are about whether the violence is. And of course, we just have recurring police incidents all over the country.
So you think that suburban voters, suburban women in particular, more inclined to see Trump as the arsonist who's kind of fueling change than the firefighter who's going to put it out, which is
they don't see him as a firefighter.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: if you're a strategist for the Biden campaign, how concerned are you about your left on this position? Of course, Biden says there's a few bad cops, but most cops are good, and that's kind of at odds with the Black Lives Matter line that we have systemic racism in police departments. You have Kamala Harris, the vice presidential nominee, who very well. She's a cop. I mean, that's the Twitter line on her. She's the cop. Is there a problem for them in terms of either enthusiasm or voter turnout or anything like that on the left on this issue?
I don't think so. I think we're going to have an enormous turnout. I think it's inevitable that we're going to be a big turnout. And everything should strongly suggest millennials, younger African Americans, younger Latinos are all moving towards Biden. I mean, we had this little flurry, as Jerry, I've seen this a million times. The serendipity poll comes out somewhere, and they says, oh, the crosstabs show that there's an erosion in the Latino vote. Now we have like 5 or 6 or 7 polls, whatever it is, and it's really no erosion in the Latino vote. It's just that was just one outlier poll.
Yeah. All right, and then finally, the last issue they're going to talk about, which would be fascinating, is the integrity of the election, and
that's really tough.
And that's obviously the $750 question of the election. I mean, all the signs point toward Biden, possible Democratic wave, possible Democratic takeover of the Senate, all of these things. But then you have this guy, who's the president, has all of the machinery of government, who's going around saying any election that I don't win is obviously rigged and not fair. I mean, how does that keep you up at night as much as it does me? Or I think you're more sanguine about this than most.
I am. I basically think that when you start looking at the states that he's complaining about, California, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, he's not going to be within shouting distance of winning any of those states. He's going to lose them all by 20, 30 points. So, the only state that's kind of a swing state that he's complaining about is Nevada. And at the end of the day, I think Biden will win Nevada by a pretty serious margin. Maybe not double digits, but I think high single digits. But I don't. What does he care what we do in California? Last week, what was the Berkeley poll was 9:30 or something.
Yeah. Well, but then you have like the situation in Pennsylvania where there are going to be ballots.
Yeah, that was a bad little contrivance they came up with. They found 8 ballots and there were military and all that. Are there a handful of things around the country like that? Of course there are.
Well, and then, I mean, you've been reading all of this worst case scenario journalism from the Atlantic and elsewhere. So, the scenario is election night, Trump declares victory based on, early returns or whatever. Possession's 9/10 of the law. And then you just have this struggle for the next 77 days or whatever it is. Now you got Nancy Pelosi sending a memo to her members saying we have to get a majority of state delegations because that's the way the electoral college vote plays out. I mean, the Democrats didn't do very well in managing the message of this in 2000, or they did. I mean, Gore basically observed all of the norms of our democracy for the last 350 years. This guy's not going to do that. Just give me your prognosis on this.
Well, I think in 2000, Brevard County in Florida was absolutely a terrible mess, and it definitely adversely affected Vice President Gore. That was such an unusually isolated thing. I mean, the other alternative, since you spun a dismal alternative world, the serendipity world would say, okay, so the polls close back on the East Coast. They call Florida around midnight Pacific time, and or maybe a little earlier. And how the hell is Trump going to win now?
Yeah, if Florida's gone
pretty early. I mean, if all these states that are if you have states that are not considered the core thing based on the 2016 model, you have Florida, or you have obviously Michigan, Wisconsin,
North Carolina.
In North Carolina, we're supposed to have been very.
Yeah. All right, man. So bottom line, Biden just needs to survive this thing, huh? That's what.
So I don't. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said. So what, he just needs to come out of there?
I just. Oh yeah, I think he comes out of there with a good, solid performance, and hopefully Trump will, misbehave and act like a jerk, and we'll have a week of, fact checking and backing up, and Mark Meadows will age 25 years in a week. I think. I think there's something to this, like the incumbent coming in there, their first debate and getting caught flat-footed too. It's happened too much.
Yeah. All right, man. Bill Carrick, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, and we'll. Oh gosh, I guess we got to watch the thing. There's no NBA on.
No excused absences for this.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Bill.